Hello, this is Lewis describing a new feature for PredictMail called Hot Folders. Hot Folders are the ability to have a folder that is bound to an email address, and when you drop a file into a hot folder, it sends that file as an attachment to an email address that is predetermined. And for inbound, if someone sends an email to a specific email address, then that shows up, all the attachments in that email show up magically in the hot folder. So it's the ability for you to transfer files back and forth to via email without having to open up an email client, create an email, and then attach an item, a file, and then send it. And then when receiving, again, opening up the email and then extracting the attachment from the email and saving it someplace. So it automates that process. All right, so to use hot folders, first thing we do is Wi-Fi connect to the hub, and as usual, we log in as admin. And once logged in, we navigate over to the PredictMail application. Now, hot folders use something called network shares. Obviously, the hub is not on your computer, and therefore, in order for you to save files to the hub so that it can find them and send them off via email, it needs to use a network share folder to share those files, or to give you access to a file system that allows you to share files between the hub and yourself. So the network shares are controlled under a tab called Network Shares. And before you can actually set up your hot folders, you really need to set up the network shares. And so I'll just demonstrate how to do that. So you just navigate over to Network Shares. This is the host name. So when you advertise this, for example, if you're connecting to a Windows machine, it'll show up with that host name description. And then, of course, since we're using Windows networking here, it has a work group associated with it. Now, by default, all interfaces are disabled, and so you need to specify what interfaces are going to be used for doing the sharing. So typically, if you're Wi-Fi connecting or using the LAN port on the hub, you can just select LAN, leave the WAN unchecked. But if you're going to be logging in remotely through the WAN, as I do often here in the office, you enable that. Once enabled, you can go ahead and then create these shared directories. Now you'll notice I've created some here. I'll just create one very quickly here that I'm not going to use, but for purposes of demonstration, you just click the Add button. Then you give the new share folder a name. I'm going to call it Testing. You give it a path, and then you can specify whether you want to allow guests or whether you want read-only. So let me go over some of these options. The name is the name of the share that shows up under networking. So we'll see that when we connect to the network server to reach a share. It will see a number of shares, and the share is going to be by the name. The path is the name of the actual folder on the hub. Now, typically, when I create these, I create the name, the advertised name, and the path the same, just to avoid confusion. But here, for our test example, I'm just going to keep them separate so that you can see the difference. And again, this is a name. Testing will be the name that gets advertised to the network, and test is the name of the folder that's actually created on the disk. Now, for this demonstration purposes, I'm just going to allow guest, which allows us to log in and use those network shares without having to have a username and a password. There is a facility for actually adding users. You would just click Add, give a username and a password, and then you would type in the usernames in here, followed by commas if there's more than one. And that would require the network share to have authentication when you're connecting to those shares. But for our purposes here, we'll just use guest. And then read-only, of course, is if for some reason you want to have a share that you can read files from. So for example, on an inbound share where someone is sending emails and storing them on the hub, but you don't want a specific user to be able to delete those, then you can specify that that's a read-only, and that would remove that. So hit save and apply, and that will basically create the network share for us. I'll demonstrate how to access those in a second here. Okay, so that's all done now. I will mention that I've created a couple shares here. I've created one called Extra Out. It's going to be my transfer out hot folder. So my any files that get transferred into that hot folder will automatically be emailed to the internet. I've created a share called Extra In. That is my inbound share folder. That means that any emails that get sent to me at a specific address will be the attachments will be extracted and then stored in this particular share. And then I've created one more share, which is an archive. And as we'll see, when we transfer files out of our hot folder, the hub will automatically delete those files because they've been sent. So there's no longer need to keep them. But we will have the option to make a backup copy of those and store them in the archive folder. And again, I've just given this the name of archive. So the names are arbitrary. You can name them whatever you want. Now, let's go ahead and demonstrate how you access these from, in this case, a Macintosh. For a Windows machine, the process would be very similar. So I'm going to bring up the Finder here, and although you can't see my menus, at the top of the screen I have some menus, and I have one called Go. I'm going to go down here and select Go, Connect to Server, which is the very last entry under the Go menu. So as soon as I do that, I get a little connection screen, and I'm going to connect using SMB, which is the Windows Network Sharing Protocol. So I put in SMB:// and then the IP address of the hub. Since I'm Wi-Fi connected to the hub, that will be 10.10.10.1, and I hit connect. All right, as soon as I do that, I get a login screen. Again, if I had a registered user, I would put in the username and the password. Since I said I could allow guests, I'm going to say connect to guest. And again, so here are the shares. You notice that I have 4 of them because I had to find 4 of them. And testing was the only one that I had that, as you see down here, has a different path. But all I see from the Mac end is the network share. Now I'm going to basically demonstrate using the output Extra Out hot folder. So I need to connect to that. And there it is. There's my hot folder. I don't have anything in it. I'm going to open up another Finder window here, and I will be copying, in this case, an XML file, which I will be transferring. But before we do that, let's go ahead and see what the setup is for the hot folders themselves. So all we've done right now is created the network shares. We haven't created any hot folders. Now, we set up the hot folders. We go to Settings. And if you look down at the bottom of the page, you'll see Mail File Transfer Rules. So these are rules that are used to transfer files from shares over to an email, or from an email back to a share. I've created a couple here. To create a new one, you just put in a name here and hit Add. But I'm not going to bother doing that. I'm just going to edit the ones that I have here. So I have one that's called Inbound and one that's called Outbound. All right, so let me just go ahead and edit the inbound one. For the inbound one, you notice that the name, my email address, the email address associated with this is the name of the share itself. So when I create a share, I'll just go ahead and create one for you so that you see. If I create I'm going to create a test hot folder. I'm going to hit Add. As soon as you see that, you notice that there's an email address associated with that hot folder, which is called test. So For outbound hot folders, the email address on the from of that email will be from that particular email, from this email address, which is going to be your username plus the name of the hot folder. And for inbound emails, again, it's the email, and the email sent to this particular address. Again, your PredictWin username plus the name of the hot folder at PredictMail.com will be stored in the location. You enter a comment, and then you can specify a direction, whether you're sending to the internet or whether you're receiving from the internet. So let me just go back to, I'm just going to discard, I'm just going to go back to my overview, and I'm going to discard this one since we're not going to be using this one. So I'll just go ahead here to unsave changes, and I'm just going to go to reversed, which is just going to basically discard those changes. So here we go. So I have two rules. I have one called inbound. I have one called outbound. If I go and take a look at the inbound hot folder, I see that the email address is lsoltero plus inbound@predictmail.com. I can put in a comment which shows up in the list. And then I'm transferring from the internet to, I'm transferring from the internet to my unit. So this is a mobile terminated, as it's known in the industry, action, where we're terminating the email on the hub. And when someone sends an email with an attachment to this address, those attachments, one or more, however many there are in there, will be automatically stored in this network folder. Now, if I click here, you'll notice that I have a list of the network folders that I had created under the network tab. And so I select which one I want to use, and again, those will pop up. Those will pop up here in the case, and on my Mac on my Finder window, and under Windows Explorer when you store them on a Windows machine. So we're going to be demonstrating the outbound one. So I'm going to go here to back to my overview and take a look at my outbound one. So there's my outbound hot folder. I'll edit that just so that we can see the settings. All right, so my email address is lsoltero@outbound@predictwin.com. Any emails that are sent from that hot folder will come with that address. I have a comment which says this is to the internet. I've selected that I'm delivering to the internet. I've selected my hot folder to be X or out. Again, they're all listed there. I can select the ones I want. Now, there's a file mask. So when the hub goes to look for files in that folder, you can specify wildcards that are to be used, and any file that matches that wildcard, in this case star.star, so any file that has a dot in it, so a file name dot extension will be sent. But for example, if you only wanted to send text files, you could say star.txt. So you get to specify again wildcards which determine which files are going to be sent. Now you also have the option for a reply to. Now this is all optional. It can be none, in which case then there's no reply to address, or you can specify one that you want. In this case, I'm just going to say send it to the inbound hot folder. In other words, when I send this email out to the internet, when I send this file out to the internet, it's going to come as an email. It's going to arrive at somebody's email address, and they may hit a reply. They may want to reply and add some other attachments or whatever. When that email comes back into the hub, it's going to be sent. It's got to be sent somewhere. Well, I can send it to a hot folder, or I could just send it to myself or whatever. So you can specify a reply to email address. You can specify that there is no reply to email address, in which case then it'll just come to the outbound address, but it can't be delivered there because of course that's an outbound, not an inbound folder. And so in that case, anything that can't be delivered will just be delivered to the primary account, in this case lsoltero@predictmail.com. So I can say none, or I can come in here and actually type in a custom email address if I want to at domain.com, and then it'll store it there. But for now, for the purposes of demonstration, I'm just going to select lsoltero plus inbound@predictmail.com, which means that if somebody replies to my outbound email, it'll just send it and store in the attachments in the inbound folder, in the inbound hot folder. Now, you also specify the email address that you want to send this to. I'm going to send it to myself. So that means that I'm going to create a hot folder, drop a file in it, and it'll send it out to the internet. And then it'll deliver it to this email address, which is my email address. And then when I do an email session, it'll come down and I can look at it in my email client. So we'll do that for purposes of administration. I can give a subject to the email that goes out, and then I can specify whether I want to archive the original file or not. And so I can select archive folder. Yes, again, this is just a checkbox, turn it on, and then you can select, again, one of the network shares, and any files that are sent will automatically be archived in that location. So, that's my hot folder setup. Well, so let's give it a try. Now I'm going to go over here to Tools, just so that I can see the log files as things happen. And let me mention before that I've got my settings here for under my email settings under connection. I've got my policy set to immediate on sending. That means that any files, as soon as they hit the hot folder or as soon as I create an email, automatically Hub will start a session and send those emails out to the internet. Again, we reviewed this in a previous video, but you've got several different options here, including manual start and stop, which can be used to just tell the Hub that you're not going to send any emails or receive any emails unless somebody comes and pushes the connect button under Tools. But for now, I'll just leave it under immediate, and so we should get an immediate action when we send our files. So let's try this again. So here we are. We're disconnected. Here's the logs from our previous session. Here's my hot folder, and here is a XML file. So I'm just going to take a look real quick here and view this. I'm just going to open a text edit. It's a very simple XML file. There it is. I'm going to send that as an attachment to my hot folder. Okay, so here it is. Now I'm just going to go ahead and drag that into my hot folder and drop it in. So I've just copied it. Now we'll keep an eye on the logs and see what happens. The Hub should pick that up. Oh, look at this. It's delivering file. It's queuing up to send. Okay, so it's queuing up the file to be sent. It's now connecting to the internet. There's my mail session. It's starting my mail session. All right, it's connected to the server. It's now transferring the file. The upload is now complete. And now we're going to disconnect. So we've now just basically successfully transferred the email. You notice that we had no inbound email because I didn't have any emails on the server, but I did send an email out. Now, I know that I sent myself an email, so there should be one on the server that's waiting for me, which is the email that was created from the hot folder. Now, again, the Hub doesn't have the ability to know when there's something on the server, so you have to do the connect button in order to be able to download any emails, or have the Hub automatically check every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes or every 5 minutes, check the server to see if there's any emails. But since we only have an immediate policy and we're not actually doing this on a timer, I'm going to go ahead and hit connect, and that should download an email, which is the one that was sent from the hot folder. So let's check that. Here we go. We're starting our mail session. Okay, we're logging in. We'll have no outbound email. We do have an inbound email. There it is. The transfer is now complete, and it delivered the email, and I disconnected. All right, so now I have downloaded an email, so I'll go to my email client, which is configured for the Hub. This is on the Mac. Again, I'll just do a get new mail. You can't see me do that, but I'll do that, and there it is. I just received an email, and look where it's from. It's from elsolteroutbound@predictmail.com, which is my hot folder. Got a subject of auto transfer. If I click on that, there's my XML file just as I demonstrated before we send it. Now, it is an attachment, but the hub is pretty intelligent about specifying the MIME types for the attachments. In this case, it set the MIME type to to XML text, and therefore the email client was able to know that this was text in XML format and was able to just display it in line. If it were just a binary data file, then it would just show up as an attachment, and you could save it someplace. So it's just going to be based on the MIME types. Anyway, that concludes my demonstration. I hope you enjoy the hot folders. Thanks for listening. Take care, and until next time, this is Lewis.